Hello friends, welcome to math class. Today we're going to be continuing our work on patterns and on fractions. And we're going to start by looking with workbook page 130. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to take your pencil and I want you to look at your hexagon at the top. It says today we're going to call the hexagon from our pattern blocks one whole. We're going to tell what fraction of the whole each of the blocks below is and explain how we know. So in order for us to do this effectively through a video, I feel like we really need to look at the hexagon and how we can build a hexagon using a trapezoid, a rhombus, and a triangle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, if I just used trapezoids, we can pretty clearly see that two of these, 1, 2, would make one whole hexagon. Now, if you have your pattern blocks, great. Go ahead and build a hexagon using 2 trapezoids. So 1 trapezoid would be 1/2 because it's half of the hexagon. It would take 2 pieces that look like this. We'd have to come down to make another one, right? So I'm going to try to draw 2 trapezoids right here to show this one. This one's pretty easy to kind of see. Now, Mr. L is not the best at drawing, but we're going to have a growth mindset and remember that everybody gets some grace. Okay, so 1/2 and 1/2 equals one whole hexagon. Okay, now if the hexagon is 1, then the blue rhombus, now if we have our pattern blocks, you can take a blue rhombus and you can try to figure out how many of these would fit inside of this hexagon. But if you're like me and you're at home, because I'm recording this today from home, I am going to use my pencil and I'm going to draw this rhombus inside my hexagon. So I'm actually going to think about this as a rhombus. And I'm not going to do it blue. I'm going to do yellow because I'm going to have to go back and do triangles in a minute. So I'm just going to shade this in yellow. Now hopefully you can see the rhombus now within my hexagon here. Now that's just one. And these I went ahead and partitioned into triangle pieces, but I could color these 2 in, and that would make the same shape. Hopefully you guys can see that. Maybe I'll just go ahead and erase. Let me erase this. And then you'll be able to see that it would take 3 yellow rhombuses or 3 blue rhombuses, if you're using your pattern blocks, they're usually blue, to make the hexagon. So that means each part would be 1 out of 3. So here's going to be Mr. Ella's task. I'm going to try to draw 3 rhombuses. They're kind of like squares on a slant here. Or like some of you say sometimes when you see this shape, you're like, oh, it's a cube, Mr. Ella. It's not a cube. It is a hexagon that can look like a cube. Depends on if you're telling yourself if it's 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional. Okay, so I have 1 blue rhombus here, or in this case yellow, 1 blue rhombus here, and 1 blue rhombus here. So that's 1 out of 3. So each rhombus is 1/3. It would take 3 to make the whole. So, comma, I need 3 rhombuses or rhombus shapes to make the whole hexagon. Okay, at any time, pause if you need to catch up to writing the explanation. Or if you wrote something different, as long as it talks about that each rhombus is 1/3 or 1 part out of 3, then that would be acceptable. Okay, now if you have your pattern blocks, the little triangles are green. And if I look back at my shape here, I can divide each rhombus into 2 triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and divide that one right here. So I'm going to see that I'm going to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each triangle is 1/6. So if you remember in the beginning when we had the whole right here, this was 1/2. Remember? Then we had the yellow part was 1/3. 1/3 was our rhombus. And then each one of these is 1/6 because they're one part out of 6. So the yellow is 1/3. And we know that 2/6 is equal to 1/3. So that's another representation of that equivalent fractions, which name the same amount. So if you needed to know what one triangle represented of the hexagon, you would tell me 1/6, because it would take 6 triangles to make the hexagon. Each triangle is 1/6 of the whole. I know because I need 6 triangles to make a hexagon. And I know I'm using my crazy print cursive. This is H-E. I'm just going to rewrite that again for you. Hexagon. Hexagon. Okay. So if you need to, go ahead and pause this video and finish up this section, and then come back to me when you're ready to compare. All right, hopefully you have finished up the top part of this section. Now we're moving on to our second part. We're writing greater than, equal to, or less than in the circle or in the space between each pair of fractions to show how they compare. We're going to use our pattern blocks to help us if we need the help, or we can also draw pictures. The first one is done for us. 1/2 and 2/6. So this one's comparing to half. So the first thing I need to think about is, what is half of 6? 3. So when I compare to half, if I don't draw a model and I want to use my understanding of fractions, I can think about, okay, well, if my 2 became a 6, right, I'm making an equivalent fraction, 3/6 is the same as half. So now I can compare 3 out of 6 or 2 out of 6. Well, duh, hello, 3/6. We knew that. All right. So let's try this one. So we have 1/3 or 2/6. I can easily make my thirds into 6s, because I know that if I drew a picture, I could take my thirds. Let's see. I'm going to use my space up here. So if I drew some thirds like this, and I wanted to make them into 6s, I would just cut each third into a half, or multiply the fraction by 2. So I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So say that with me. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Or whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom. So I'm going to take my bottom, the denominator, and multiply it by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And then whatever you do to the bottom, do to the top. 1 times 2 is 2. So now I can see that 2 out of 6 is equivalent to 1/3. So these two are equal. Okay, let's look over here. 3/6 or 2/3. So I'm working with thirds and 6s. I know that if I had thirds, I could make them into 6s. 2/3 would just look like, I'm going to shade it a different color so you can still see. So here's my 2/3. So if I have my orange piece and my yellow piece. If I wanted to make those into 6s, all I would need to do would be to cut all of my pieces into halves. So 2/3 is equal to, I don't know if you can still see that. 2/3 is equal to 4/6. See how 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 6. I'm going to show you how to use multiplication to show you that same problem. So to go from 3 to 6, I multiply the denominator by 2. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Now multiply the numerator by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So 4/6 and 2/3 are equivalent. So I'm going to now tell you that 3/6 and 4/6, we have to compare them. 3/6 is less than 4/6. So it's just like that. Okay, let's look at this. I have a cake, you have a cake. They're both the same size. I cut mine in halves, you cut yours in thirds. I have all my pieces, you have all your pieces. We each have the entire cake, so we each have a whole. So these are equal. 3/3 is equal to 1 whole. 2/2 is equal to 1 whole. Take a minute and draw a model for those two. Okay, let's look down here at the bottom. 2 out of 3, or 1/2. So we're comparing to half here. So let's think about this. If I know that, let's think about, instead of a cake, let's think about cookies, okay? 2 cookies out of 3, or half of the cookies, okay? So there are 3 cookies, and you and your best friend get to split them. That would be what half would be, right? So when we're thinking about half, what would half of these cookies be? All right, so you get a cookie, and your best friend gets a cookie. And then the third cookie, you want to eat it because you're really hungry. So the fair thing to do would be to cut it in half. 1/2 is for your friend, and 1/2 is for you. Okay? So half of 3 is 1/2. Do you guys see that? I'm going to write that out, what I just said. 1/2 of 3 cookies is 1 and 1/2. It makes a mixed number, right? Okay, so you get 1/2 cookies. That's what this side would be. 1/2 cookies. 1 and 1/2 cookies. On this side, if you got 2 out of the 3 cookies, you get the whole number 2. 2 cookies. Now, what would be more if you had 2 cookies or 1/2 cookies? 2. So basically what I just explained to you was I took the denominator 3 and I thought about if I took 3 and I divided it into 2 equal pieces, because we're dividing it by 2. 3 cookies divided by 2 people would be 1/2. So it's kind of like this. 1 and 1/2 over 3. Compare that to 2/3. And we know that 2 out of 3 is bigger than 1/2 out of 3. Does that make sense? And yes. Okay, if you have questions about this, send Miss Gerald an email at missgerald@camus.wednet.edu, and I'll be happy to set up a time to just message you back or send you some more explanations on that, or you can ask Miss LaFleur in class or myself in class as well. But if you are really confused about this problem, when you're comparing to half using an odd number, then let us know and we'll go over it. But my best advice to you is to use cookies and think about cutting them into 2 equal groups and then comparing to the other side. Okay? All right, let's move on. So 2/3 or 5/6. So let's just change 2/3 into 6s. And I'm kind of out of room here, so I'm going to do 2/3 down here is how many 6s? 3 times 2 is 6. So 2 times 2 is 4, because we would take those thirds, just like we did up here, and we would cut them into each third become halves to get 4/6. Now, tell me what's bigger, 4/6 or 5/6? Correct. 5/6 is more. Okay. 3/6 or 1/2? I know that 3 is half of 6, so these are going to be equal. But just for practice, we're going to see, using this denominator, you would just ask yourself, what is half of 6? You tell yourself 3, so 1/2 is equal to 3/6. Compare 3/6 to 3/6, and they are equal. Okay, let's look at the denominator and numerator over here. 4 out of 6 or 2/3. So again, I know I can take thirds and divide them by 2 and get to equal to 6s. So I'm going to, or multiplying them rather, change 2/3 into 6s by cutting my thirds in half. So 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. Whatever you do to the numerator, you do to the denominator. 4/6 and 4/6 are equivalent fractions. They name the same amount. 4/6 and 2/3 are equal. Okay, we did a lot of work in section 2 that is new for a lot of third graders. So give yourself a big round of applause if you need to. And I would really recommend all of you to do this, unless you feel like you could just do this all on your own. I would recommend that you rewind this video back to the beginning of section 2 and just listen the second time and just kind of follow along, looking at your paper and watching what we do on the video together. Just let that sink in. You know, research says that you need to read things and hear things at least 3 to 7 times to make it stick in your brain. All right, friends, you guys are doing wonderful, amazing things with fractions. Make sure that you continue in your math work for today in your math jobs and learn a lot. Bye, friends.